Thank you so much for joining us this evening on our first event to launch one of our reports, but actually the fourth report that we have released from Hertility, showcasing our data in our mission to really just show to you exactly everything that we learn as we learn it, so that hopefully change can start with you, not just with us. We don't guardrail our data. We don't keep it for ourselves. We use it so that we can make change and make true impact. I can't see my own slides on the computer here. I can't see my own slides here. Oh, they're only going to be here. Okay. Okay. Why are we all here? I turned the corner wondering, is anybody going to come? Why would we care is one of the first questions that we were asked when trying to just get investment into Hertility. And seeing a room full of people really emphasizes that we do care and that people are hungry for information. Some of the most well-performing content out there is simply content that gives women answers, even if it's true or not, when they are clinging on for some form of information to be shared. But information has been significantly lacking. And this is what we see. Since the very beginning, there has been an inconsistent and unquantifiable amount of data that actually gives us anything statistical to deal with. When we start to drill down on the most seminal of papers that we use to inform clinical diagnoses, they have pathetic amounts of women included. So we're here to change that. We built Hertility out of that true calling to say, actually, enough is enough. If there is no data there, we will create the data. I'm just pressing this button, but I'm hoping somebody else up there is doing something. Okay, great. I just want to take a moment to just introduce myself and my co-founders. I am an associate professor in reproductive and molecular genetics at University College London. I've been there for 11 years, lecturing master's students and medical students about reproductive science, women's health, about early embryology, about female reproductive anatomy, physiology. And I've been 19 years in London since I came here to do my own master's in prenatal genetics and fetal medicine, and was so hungry for information myself that I went on to do a PhD in stem cell genetics and developmental biology. And my PhD focused on the formation of the ovary versus the uterus versus the testis. And so in that time, I remember thinking how different every single one of our cells is, how different we are from an endocrinological perspective, from a genetic perspective, from a chromosomal perspective, from a cellular and anatomy perspective. Every one of our organs shaped quite differently. And thinking, how is it that in general trials, we don't look at the difference? We don't stratify according to sex in general trials, when the differences could be huge. I met Dr. Natalie, my co-founder, in the Institute for Women's Health, where she was doing her PhD in cryopreservation of ovarian tissue for cancer patients. And I think the professional term is to nerd out with somebody. We both nerded out together, but also felt the same frustrations. I was looking, saying, why is it that we don't have proper data to really inform true decision-making when it comes to our reproductive health? And she was focused on cancer patients. And how do we help cancer patients going through gonadotoxic treatment and say, actually, we need to preserve your fertility? And she thought, why is it that only in cancer patients we're talking about preserving fertility? Shouldn't we be doing this in the general population? And then the busiest of lives, the most frequent thing that people say to me is, we just need another one of you. But the other one of me is extremely busy. And so this is not a mirrored image of me. It is my mirror image, monozygotic monochorionic clone, Deirdre. We were very fortunate to share a womb, and the uterus of that womb is in this room as well. And I am incredibly grateful for that uterus for birthing us. The donor of the DNA that comes from the XY individual is also sat here, and I'm very grateful to both of those people for creating us human beings. Okay, we'll move on. So the biggest bottleneck we have in data is the menstrual cycle. I don't know how many times all of you, if you're interested in women's health, will have heard the statistic, women weren't included in clinical trials until 1993. And I have to admit, I kind of eye roll when I hear that statistic now. Women weren't included in clinical trials till 1993. It still shocks some people. For me, I'm sick of hearing that same statistic. And we can give out about that statistic all we want. But the fact is, there is a biological phenomenon which prevents us from actually including women at scale, and that is the menstrual cycle. So while we can complain that it was only in 1993 that the law changed to insist that at least one woman was included in your clinical trial, today we actually see that many clinical trials that are running still only include just that one woman. But the reality is, and I'll tell you this from a scientist perspective and from a clinical trial perspective, it is difficult to include women if you are studying anything to do with reproduction. And that is because at any single time point within 1 month, you are endocrinologically a different person. And so to capture women at this one point here, where everything is at a baseline, before all of these hormones set off on a wonderful and powerful cascade, to capture women at this exact point at scale is truly difficult. It requires you to be in present to take your blood on the 3rd day of your menstrual cycle. Bear in mind, you only have 12 of those every year. And that's if you have regular cycles. And so capturing this data at scale is actually a very difficult thing to do. Coupled with the fact that as we are changing, yes, we see throughout every single month our menstrual cycle will change all of our reproductive hormones. But that is constantly changing as we age. So then capturing aged, matched at a time-specific point is even harder. When we started Hertility as a clinical trial. The goal was to recruit women with a known pathology and to reverse engineer their statistics, their blood work, their symptoms, their menstrual factors, and say, could we have predicted this pathology in the general population? And actually, sitting and recruiting women is quite a difficult thing to do. As you can imagine, if you are sat already in clinic and somebody approaches you, the most likely thing you're going to say to them is, no, thank you, not interested. Please go away. I'm already nervous. So that's another barrier when it comes to actually collecting this data at scale. So recruiting women at this time point, this specific time point, enough women with enough pathologies, with enough age ranges, with enough ethnicities, now things really start to compound. So what I want to show you is actually the life cycle of what we've created at Hertility and how robust this data is, but also how transformative it is to simply unlock something like at-home testing, to really unlock that data, to enable women to not have to go to an appointment, to not have to take time off work, to not have to miss it that month because it fell on a Sunday or when they were away or when they had a critical meeting to be at. To be able to test from home truly unlocks the biggest data bottleneck that we have, and that is collecting day 3 data at scale. So I'm going to bring you through the journey in case you're not familiar with it. Oftentimes people associate Hertility with being simply a test, and we are so much more than that. In fact, we have strived, I would say many of the team in the audience would say we have killed ourselves to be everything else at the end of that test. And so every journey does start with our online health assessment. Depending on the results or the answers you've told us within that health assessment, we will then inform what panel of analytes we will test you for that will be most informative to get you to a clinical diagnosis. We have then coded over 54,000 clinical scenarios so that every single data point you've told us in that health assessment and every single data point that we receive in your blood results is informative about you. We then have onward clinical services so that you can instantly book to speak to an expert, whether it's a fertility advisor, a consultant gynecologist, whether it is a nutritional expert, so that any type of expert that you need following those results is there, including counseling. We can then have almost same-day scans that you can book. About 47% of people who book with us have results that are indicative or warrant clinically investigation with an ultrasound scan. So we provide that. And then we offer clinical pathways for IVF and egg freezing or anything else you should need in terms of assisted reproduction. And we are really motivated. I think the power of community is one of the most incredible things that we have, because the collective voice, but also the data, helps us to inform the journey that we can help individuals undergo. And then all of this is really culminated in the crown jewel, I would say, which is our clinical diagnostic tool, which we call Gyne AI. So it's important to note that when we talk about AI, we're not talking about general ChatGPT. We're not talking about generalized AI tools that pull information from the internet, from any source. We are talking about our own proprietary, labeled, annotated patient data with known outcomes, and that is highly robust. There's always a clinician who is quality checking and ensuring that we have actually aligned these symptoms with blood results, with ultrasound scans. And so that tertiary layer of data, that multimodal data set, is truly informative in building a predictive diagnostic algorithm that screens for over 18 different gynecological pathologies with 98 to 99% confidence, both precision and recall. That's what we call Gyne AI. So I want to just walk you through the journey, because sometimes it's easy to overlook an online health assessment. But that is truly where we've taken so much of this data. These first 3 steps here are really where we're looking to display and just talk about what it is that we've found. This online health assessment isn't just a series of questions. It is actually a clinically validated health assessment that is patent pending, but it also contains all of the international diagnostic criteria and guidelines that clinicians use to diagnose people with different reproductive conditions. Now, you would think there is one set of diagnostic criteria that clinicians use per condition, but the American Society for Reproductive Medicine has their criteria. The Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists has their criteria. The European Society has theirs, and you're getting the picture. Each of them have their own set of defined criteria. And yes, they overlap with many symptoms, but actually they still have distinct sets of criteria, meaning that a clinician at one point in the world is going to potentially miss your diagnosis if you are in that point and they're using one set of criteria. They are also consensus-led guidelines. And what consensus-led guidelines mean are that experts get together in a room and they decide in their clinical experience. And their clinical experience is hugely valuable, but it always should be underpinned with robust data at scale. And that's really where we come in. So that online health assessment contains all of those international diagnostic criteria embedded as a weighted algorithm. So as somebody is going through the health assessment, they're telling us symptoms, menstrual factors, lifestyle factors. What they're doing is telling a story to a non-judgmental interface. And we really believe in the power of telling a story, or your story, especially when it's intimate health, to somebody that is not looking you in the eyes and judging you in any way. But also what it's doing, for what we're doing, is we're calculating a risk. We're calculating a potential diagnosis. And with that calculation, what we're able to do is then say, based on this combination of symptoms, menstrual factors, and lifestyle factors, this person has a high likelihood of having a given pathology, for example, PCOS. And if we think you have PCOS, we're probably right. We'll then test all of the relevant analytes to confirm that suspected diagnosis. So that loop is constantly improving. We give a suspicion, we confirm it with the bloods. But then the seamless blood collection is really important. It's not as seamless as we want it to be. I'm aware that a finger prick analysis is actually quite painful to your fingers, especially if you're furiously typing for the rest of the week. Nonetheless, we did clinical concordance studies to ensure the relative reliability of capillary blood testing versus gold standard venipuncture. And the reason why I am most convinced that smaller amounts of blood for analysis is important is that over 30% of women are anemic. And this entire emphasis on this report is that we are too tired to be ignored. And one of the biggest things that causes that tiredness is being anemic. So we don't want to take any extra blood in case we make you more anemic. So this doctor-written report has really gone through hundreds of thousands of clinician reviews. We're now in a really exciting phase where we're starting to use AI and generate our own language learning models to say, how can we be the best report there is? How can we pull in all of that information? It's physically impossible for a human being to pull in all of this information, to calculate it, and to give you back that information. And I think that's really where we're starting to leverage technology in a truly robust way to transform health. This is not to take people away from doctors. It's to make sure that doctors can do their job to their best capacity. After all, one of the biggest cited problems in medicine at the moment is clinician burnout. And when you have clinician burnout, it doesn't matter their reason for going into medicine. It doesn't matter their true passion to help people. When you are burnt out, it means you have no care for what is in front of you. You are truly burnt out. And when you have clinician burnout, it means people don't get the care that they deserve, and clinicians don't get to deliver the care that they want. So the first phase of this has been delivering this outward journey for patients, enabling women to get the access to the care that they need. But the next phase for us has been that we have built a truly amazing, and I say this with my team and full praise for them, amazing patient management system, but also clinician interface, so that our clinicians are doing the absolute best job, and we're able to streamline the clinical report letter writing, and also the diagnostic timeframe. Okay, I shall move on with a nod to our Hertility app and say that everyone should download it. It won't be the first time that I ask you to do this, and I'll give you a reason why. Okay, so our commitments throughout all of this remain the same. Our commitments that we believe the female body should not be a medical mystery. It is a medical wonder, and we should treat it as that. We're committed to closing the gender data gap, and that is why we've launched our reproductive report. So we have 5 pillars. I hope you will stay with me. So the 5 pillars, every year we usually have 4. This year we had a lot to cover. We actually consolidated. We had 6 at one point, and I was like, I can't stay up there all night. I would do it. I would do it gladly. The first is that a woman's instinct is the strongest predictor of diagnosis. We know our own bodies. The second is that we are living in an epidemic of fatigue and mental health, and the symptoms are those that women have just learned to live with. The third is that health literacy is not necessarily improved just because technology has. The fourth is that traditional healthcare pathways are failing women. And the fifth is that we have all of the tools to accelerate diagnosis. We're just not getting the attention we deserve. That's not the end. And we're done. Although I think I didn't use my clicker. I do this for a living. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so the data I'm going to talk about actually is from 527,895 women. When we talk about over 1 million women have started their journey. When you start to curate the data and to say, how can we have the most full, robust data set of answers that in terms of what the questions we are asking of it, that is 527,000 full health assessments. We have over 680 full health assessments, but this is the data point. I'm very exact about things, in case you hadn't noticed. Okay, so the first of our pillars, a woman's concern about her own body, are the strongest predictor of a diagnosis. Does this surprise anybody? And yet, how many of you could present in a clinical office and say, I just don't feel right. I just feel a bit off. Not many of us could use that as an opening gambit and hope to get a diagnosis. Many of the things that lead to that feeling of unease, of unwellness, are hard to pinpoint, and many of them very easy to explain away with our busy lives. So what's in a name? A name gives a diagnosis. I'm not expecting you to all be able to read all of these. What this shows you is a list of the conditions that we ask women. Have you ever been diagnosed with any of the following reproductive health conditions? And the list is extensive. In fact, that's one of the things that many people have come to us. They said, you've listed Asherman's. It's so rare. No one's ever asked me about that, but I have it. And we've curated this list and extended it and asked women. But one of the things that we put at the top of this list is, I have no diagnosis, but I suspect something's up. And what amazes me about this is that it is not a diagnosis, but it is as profound as any in predicting a diagnosis in women. When we look, 80.3% of women who told us they suspected something was up had results that were indicative of a diagnosis. And yet, the feelings that we have are so nebulous. Feeling tired, feeling unwell, feeling pain. We have normalized so many of the symptoms that are indicative of a diagnosis. So when we look at these women 73.9% of them had at least one hormone out of the normal reference range. But when we looked at the women who specifically said they suspected something was up, 86.5% of them said they had irregular cycles. So actually, irregular cycles is a strong predictor of a diagnosis. So 86.5% of these women who had reported feeling something was up had at least one hormone out of the reference range and had irregular menstrual cycles. But irregularity is seen as normal, and irregularity is poorly defined. So now when we look actually about who these women are, what I want you to look at is the age range. 70% of these women are aged between 26 and 35 years old. And actually, when the UK government did a call for evidence for women to report for the Women's Health Strategy, 86% of women that were aged between 26 and 35 years old, these were the most likely to report feeling dismissed by the healthcare system. These are the women who are told, you should probably go away because you have no immediate need. Unless you're actively trying to conceive, we don't really need to hear from you. Unless you have immediate plans to have a baby, why are you even here? So what we're seeing here is there is a huge symptom load that is being completely ignored. So I wanted to say that our symptoms are speaking. We're never taught to listen. You would think as a reproductive health company that the most frequent symptoms we see are around menstrual pain, period cramps, heavy bleeding. But actually the most frequent symptoms that we report year on year are fatigue, low mood, anxiety. They're mental health, not necessarily menstrual health. Which leads me to pillar number 2. It's like an episode you're binge watching. We are living through an epidemic of fatigue and mental health symptoms, and women have learned to live with these. What I want you to see here is that every single year, I've just realized I can just turn here. It's much easier. Every single year, the top reported symptom that we see is fatigue. The second top reported symptom that we see is anxiety. And the third is depressive or low mood. A bit like that yawn statistic. When you say yawn, you're all going to yawn. When I say each of these, you're all going to feel quite sad. And I do too. I feel quite sad that our mental health and our menstrual health are inextricably linked, and yet they are dealt with in entirely different realms of medicine. We are being told to keep going despite feeling exhausted. And time again, the data is telling us the same thing. Our data set gets larger, but the problems remain consistent throughout these years. So when we look at fatigue itself as a warning sign, most women don't know that one of the signs of heavy menstrual bleeding, or one of the symptoms of heavy menstrual bleeding, which is a clinical parameter in itself, is fatigue. They don't realize that their fatigue should be telling them something. Because what do we do when we're tired? We blame ourselves. We say, I didn't go to bed on time. We're victims from doom scrolling. We're all working too hard. We haven't been treating our bodies well. We are the worst offenders when it comes to how we treat our own bodies, but we're also the worst offenders when it comes to just negating how we feel. If a best friend was feeling how you were feeling, if you lived in her body, you would be far faster to tell her to do something about it than you would for yourself. We mobilize ourselves for the people around us. People care for their pets more than they do for people. They spend more on pet bills than they do on themselves. And what does that tell you? 1 in 5 of our users report heavy menstrual bleeding every year. That's a lot of women who are bleeding through their pain, bleeding through their problems. And only 1 in 10, as I mentioned, can correctly identify the signs of heavy menstrual bleeding. But 6 in 10 don't know that avoiding daily activities because of bleeding is itself a warning sign. 6 in 10 women are unaware that actually, if you are not able to go about your day-to-day chores, that is a major warning sign. We have been taught to just put up and deal with it. We have been taught, and we actually inherit these problems. Because if your mother suffered from heavy menstrual bleeding, then she's going to tell you, well, that's just how it is. It's likely that your mum, your aunt, and your sisters are all going to experience the same heavy menstrual bleeding, which is pathological and not normal, But because your immediate family have had it, you're less likely to assume that this is actually leading to a problem. You're less likely to seek help. And what we see is that actually, even if you do feel that you need help, immediate family members are just as likely to tell you not to seek help because it's the norm. So when we look at the symptoms, this is quite depressing. So when you look at this graph here, when we report how many symptoms are you experiencing, the most frequent number of people that are experiencing symptoms, on average, 5 to 9 symptoms. And actually, you'll see from the health assessment at the very beginning, we ask, what brings you here? Are you experiencing symptoms? Actually, it's the women who are experiencing symptoms that usually have about 10 plus before they will qualify themselves as actually experiencing symptoms. What we see is that women come to us, they're saying, I'm just curious about my reproductive health. And they're experiencing upwards of 8 to 9 symptoms. And they don't recognize those as symptoms. And that's what's important about labeling symptoms, understanding symptoms, and understanding what is normal and what is not for any given individual. Because we have normalized symptoms, we don't recognize them as being clinical indicators for a pathology or clinical indicators that something has gone wrong. So I want to show you here our diagnostic model, because what I want to really highlight to you is that we are not individual components. Everything comes together to form the body. And a fragmented healthcare system that deals only above the belt for mental health and only below the belt for reproductive health misses out on us as whole bodies, misses out on us as being complex individuals deserving of care. So I'm going to show this video once more. This just gives you an idea of our diagnostic model, a living, breathing diagnostic model. And if you can click it again to play it, I'd be grateful. But everything in pink is a pathology or a diagnosis or a condition. And everything in blue is a lifestyle modifier or a hormone result. And everything in yellow, which you can't really see, is a hormone result, high, within range, or low. Are you able to play that again? Yeah, just go back into it. This isn't me, by the way. I'm not responsible for this. Okay, so what this enables us to do is take individual hormone results, take individual symptoms, and then really relate them to individual pathologies. Now, what you'll see is moderately low AMH is a health state, not a pathology, but we want to include any health state that could be indicative of a pathology or could lead to a change in the way your clinical care should be seen. And so what we can do is we can pull individual symptoms and see how they relate to individual pathologies. And we can start to see how interconnected so many different types of symptoms are, not just symptoms, lifestyle factors, hormone results, how interconnected these are to individual pathologies. And it gives us a much more powerful way of assessing our data to be truly informative so that we can really stratify our data per pathology, per individual symptom, and say, what is this linking to in the general population? And what this is linking us to is our subtle and not so subtle cues. So I want to zoom in here and just have a look at all the individual conditions. But what I wanted to bring you to here was painful bowel movements is one of the most powerful predictors we have of endometriosis. Now, when I started this, it was during COVID, and I got my master's students, because it was lockdown and they couldn't come into the lab, to do systematic reviews and meta-analyses on any genetic markers associated with endometriosis and any genetic markers associated with PCOS. And I was determined to make a genetic array that we could do a genetic test on individuals and look in the general population to say how well we could have predicted these pathologies. And when I see this, and when I see how powerful an individual symptom is, it's no wonder those students didn't go on to stay in research. It's because doing a systematic review and meta-analysis is really painstaking work. If any of you have done them, I don't recommend it. What you do is you go and you look at all of the literature that exists. You then say, what do we know? What has everybody published? How can we refine it down to say this is what everybody has concluded from all of this research? Is it in favor? Is it against? And actually, all of those systematic reviews and meta-analyses led us to a conclusion, which was, okay, there's no one gene. There's no one collection of genes. There's thousands of different genes. There's actually nothing we can really, really refine to build a predictive genetic test. And when I see this years later, what amazes me is just how simple something can be when we ask women. But actually, asking about bowel movements when you're there for a gynecology appointment may not happen. And there's a twofold failure rate. The first failure is in the clinician that has to ask you. And the second, even if they do ask you, is in you answering that appropriately. How many of you have been sat in front of a practitioner and given a different answer because of who they were? They were your doctor, sure. But how did they make you feel? If you felt uncomfortable, if you felt embarrassed, if you felt shy, if you felt intimidated, if you felt not present, if you felt completely overwhelmed, if you felt just out of breath and sweaty because you ran to get there, all of those things mean that there is a barrier to you giving honest data and them receiving enough data to make an informed decision about your clinical care. And when we separate out all of the incredible organs that are jam-packed inside our hips, from our uterus to our ovaries to our bowel, it's no wonder we see differences in how we feel. Pelvic pain seems so nebulous, but actually, when that pain can be pinpointed to something so acute, so recognizable, a painful poo, actually, it can be truly informative. And for me, showcasing this means it should be part of the clinical diagnostic criteria and guidelines. We should all understand our anatomy. Significantly, we should be taught what is between our hips. I want my daughter to be able to tell me I have a pain in my uterus and not a pain in my tummy. And I don't think that is unrealistic, an expectation. Okay, asking someone how they are feeling is also important. We ask everyone, how are you feeling? Because actually, how you're feeling is pretty predictive too. And what, again, we see from this is that it's kind of sad. When we look across the different archetypes we ask, are you calm, relaxed, confident? Are you feeling somewhat stressed? Are you completely stressed and overwhelmed? Or are you neutral? And actually, what you see is that if we were to combine somewhat stressed with completely stressed and overwhelmed, that is the majority of our data set. And this is reflective of day-to-day life. I will say that we have built tools to make our lives so much easier, but all it's meant is that there is much more responsibility on us. And life, I don't think, has gotten easier. It's definitely gotten a lot more stressful. But given how receptive and attuned our hormones are to stress, I always say about stress, imagine how one hormone makes all of us feel. Adrenaline. Give adrenaline the perfect example. Adrenaline, some people chase it. But actually, adrenaline, that one hormone, upon seeing somebody, a visual cue, upon hearing something, a bang, can kick off a systemic and multi-organ effect. Your heart starts racing. You start breathing more heavily. You want to defecate. That is your body's innate biological reaction to one hormone to say, I need to get out of here. My heart's going to race faster to get blood around my body so I can run faster. I'm going to breathe, take in more oxygen quickly so that I'm oxygenating all of my muscles. I'm going to defecate so I'm lighter when I run away. Imagine how profound and primal that instinct our body has, the production of one hormone, and it can happen just by seeing somebody. I always say your ex. Oh. Now imagine all of our hormones in sync. This complex calculus of hormones that are constantly changing, but they're evolving and changing, and they're receptive to stress. And their one role when it comes to reproduction is to make us create another human being. Imagine how profound that is, that our bodies are able to adapt, to feed, to birth. And actually, that stress factor from a very primal evolutionary perspective is extremely important, because the one thing that happens to your body when you are extremely stressed, if you're overeating or over-exercising, under-eating, is your body will say, this is not a healthy environment for me to host a pregnancy. So the first thing it will do to protect you, to preserve all your energy and keep it for you, is to shut down your reproductive function or to slow it. And many of us don't recognize those signs. Many of us don't recognize that irregular cycles could be linked to stress, that we're not ovulating because our body doesn't want us to. And actually, those very finite stressors that are around us can be modifiable and sometimes not. But when we tell people, just relax, when we tell people not to stress out, it's the most undermining thing you can hear. But actually, there is true science behind stress, and avoiding stressors where possible is really, really important. Okay, we're only on our pillar 3. I hope you're in for the rest of the ride. Okay. When we talk about all of this information, the reason I feel so passionately about educating is that just because we have access to tools, it doesn't mean we are better informed. So this third pillar, is that health literacy hasn't necessarily improved just because technology has. Technology is failing me. See? I'm trying to click forward. I've done 3 different. Can you go forward, please? Okay, so we published this paper last week, and we wanted to look at fertility awareness in women. We now know from the UK Gov that 70% of UK women have tracked some aspect of their health via an app or a device. 38% of women use a period tracking apps. But when we looked at women who are actively trying to conceive, they are making a conscious effort to have sex and make a baby. 41% of them don't realize that they didn't have to do it that night. Oh, the married women laugh. Spare me. 41% of women actively trying to conceive did not know when their fertile window was. And what this spells for me is that we have huge gaps in our education about our own bodies, how our own bodies work, and how to get pregnant, because our education has centered around how not to get pregnant. School education still focuses on how to prevent a pregnancy and how to avoid getting a sexually transmitted infection. It doesn't tell women how to get pregnant, or that actually there are only a few days in every month that you can get pregnant. It would rather you live in fear every single day taking contraception, hormonal contraception, that is going to suppress your body's natural flow. You suppress your body's natural endocrine orchestra. And actually, if you were better informed and you simply knew that stat, but not just you, if your partner also knew that stat, we would be less terrified every single time. There would be fewer women coming to get the morning after pill when they've actually had sex right after their period. So when we look at, this is the paper we published last week. That one was old news. We published it last month. When we look at the 5th vital sign, it is often overlooked or misunderstood. So the 5th vital sign, as I mentioned, is our menstrual cycle, and it is so key to how we operate as human beings. And when I give that example of us as just being evolutionary creatures that are there to protect ourselves and how our body helps us to do that, it's no surprise that irregularity in our cycle should be giving us a major warning sign. So when we look at the 28-day myth, we still look at every textbook and we say the average menstrual cycle is 28 days long. But actually what you see here is that only 32% of women on our data set actually have a 28-day cycle. 1 in 5 didn't actually know how long their menstrual cycle was. Imagine just being so blind as to when you bleed that it could creep up on you. But it happens. Imagine being so blind as to not realize that when you're ovulating, you have a superpower. It's just happening. Or that in the days prior to your menstrual cycle, you're a different entity. Your estrogen is low. You are grappling with a lack of estrogen. Estrogen that controls almost all of our biological processes. That we have twice the number of estrogen receptors in our brain. That's helping our neurocognitive function. It's helping our sleep. It's helping our dexterity. So it's no surprise you're clumsier when it comes to your menstrual cycle and the days that lead up to it. You're lacking that individual key. But imagine not knowing that. We live our lives quite differently in the absence of that knowledge. 1 in 3 women under 25 years old don't know the length of their menstrual cycle. So look at the 2 differences there. 1 in 5 women in total. But when you're under 25 years old, you're less likely to know anything. And what we see is the younger generation are actually highly likely to engage with us, but they don't understand their menstrual cycles. 1 in 10 women overall couldn't actually tell you how long their period lasted. One of the things we wanted to build into our app was real data metrics on blood flow. When does it start? When is it heaviest? When is it lightest? When is it just the browns? Because that's important to us understanding how long your period has actually lasted. When it goes away for a day and then boom, comes back, ruins your trousers. It happens to everybody. Why is that? We don't yet understand. And so we have specific data on the color, the amount, how many products you're using, because we hope to achieve just a little bit more clarity around those metrics, the metrics that people consider too gross to talk about. Everyone knows I'm a big fan of mucus. Okay. The cost of not understanding shows up when women try for a baby. So what we see here is the age you are most likely to not know when your fertile window was. So you can see the highest ignorance is under 25s, followed by 26 to 30. You really start to only understand when your fertile window is in the 45 plus range, which is not ideal. It's because you're exhausted from the babies that you didn't realize you got pregnant with. You very much know your fertile window at that stage because you can blame your children for feeling exhausted. But what we see is that we have an abundance of apps. We have an abundance of access to information, and yet we don't know the very basics of how our body works. And that even in an active journey to find out if you can conceive, you still don't know when your fertile window is. Oh, sorry, just to say that this affects you when you're trying to conceive. So what you'll see here is the people who come to us who have been trying to conceive for over a year, 46.3% of them didn't know when their fertile window was. Imagine missing a whole year of your life not knowing when your fertile window is. And these are the people that present at fertility clinics. And a fertility clinic will say, great, we'll help you have a baby and we'll charge you for that. But man, I wish you knew that you could have gotten pregnant 12 months ago if you just knew when the window was. So when we look across the different apps and the tracking and the availability of information, what we see is that actually we track a lot of things, our sleep, our calories, people wear wearables, they're tracking their periods, but none of it is interconnected. None of it is telling you one thing about this one body. None of it relates. I laugh at some of the wearable companies talking about their data, but not one of those wearable companies does an onboarding to find out why your heart rate must be higher. What is it about you that causes you to wake during the night? The simplest of metrics that could be gotten are not actually gotten. One of the wearable companies, which I will not name, rhymes with Nora, had the biggest press release ever about pregnancy mode. And at the time I was pregnant. They got a lot of congratulations for that pregnancy mode. So I opened up the app, clicked the toggle that said, I am pregnant. And that was it. Congratulations, Nora. We developed our app over a number of years, wanting to not just get metrics on your mucus or how much you bleed or what color the blood is, but to track symptoms that would enable us to pinpoint something clinical for you. To say, hey, you've logged heavy menstrual bleeding and fatigue. Did you know that this is probably a symptom of iron deficiency? Can we check your iron? That you could actually do it at the point of finding that information, that you could book additional blood tests, that you could book to speak to a practitioner, that you could book a cervical screening test or an ultrasound scan because you've told us your symptoms are indicative of it. And so often I think that these apps are really helpful. I hope nobody from Nora works here, is here. But these apps are helpful. But actually, when they tell you the signs of warning, what can you actually do about it? And that's why I'm really proud of the amount of work that we've put into our app to enable us to actually get you to care that you can book immediately for additional clinical care. Okay, reproductive revelation number 5. You're all still with me. Traditional pathways, it's unsurprising, fail the person behind the patient, leaving women vulnerable to harmful advice. So what we wanted to look at here was, where are women going for answers? And what we see is a history of medical gaslighting. So 84% of women experience not being listened to by a healthcare professional at some point in their care. And when we look at the point in their care, we can break it down by stage of care. You would think that if you're in treatment, you're being listened to. But 72% of women experienced not being listened to when discovering their symptoms, 56% when they were asking for a referral to a specialist, 54% experienced this when discussing their treatment options, and 40% during follow-up care. The point is, at every stage of your journey, seeking care, seeking advice, seeking a referral, during your actual treatment, they were still feeling that they were not being listened to by a healthcare professional. So this actually prevents women from then standing up for themselves. If you're sent away enough times, you stop advocating for yourself. One of the things that we enable people to do is to download their blood results, to bring their blood results to their GP. If you don't want to come for extra care with us, we want you to get extra care. We want you to be able to have the armor on you, the evidence with you, the data in your hand, to be able to actually go to your healthcare provider and say, this is why I need a referral. So when we looked at people who needed an appointment in the last year, more than 50% said they avoided making, this is by the Women's Health Survey, and that this is not our data. So the Women's Health Survey said that over 50% of people who needed medical appointment avoided making one. And the most common reasons, it was too difficult to make an appointment. They worried about burdening the NHS, and they didn't have enough time. So when we looked at our users who saw a GP before using Hertility, 4.5% had been referred to a specialist, 7% had reached an NHS specialist, and 44% with a diagnosis were in treatment. So we were able to actually unlock treatment for these individuals who weren't getting help in the traditional care setting. So I wanted to ask that we did an engagement survey with people who had worked with us to say, what brought you to us? I think one of the biggest things that people, I won't say complain, but challenge us with is, people should just go to the NHS. And when there are over 700,000 women on a wait list just to see a gynecology on the NHS, it is no wonder they turned to extra help. When an average wait time to see a specialist once you've been referred is 9 months, it's no wonder they came seeking extra help. And I feel personally very proud to be able to support the NHS with the backlog they are not dealing with. So when we asked them what brought them to Hertility, 39% said they didn't feel listened to by NHS healthcare professionals. 35% waited too long for NHS appointments. 34% just didn't know where to turn for help. 33% felt their symptoms were dismissed. 25% struggled to access fertility-related care. 23% couldn't afford private options. 16% were dealing with confusing or unclear medical information, and 5% didn't feel listened to by a private healthcare professional either. This is not me slamming the NHS in any way. I'm just showing you the data on why people come to us. When one of the most frequent questions people ask us is, why should you exist if the NHS is there? So for me, I just want to highlight the voices of the individuals who have come to us and showcase why it is they've needed additional support. So when dismissal is at every turn, trust is the price. So this is a really interesting one where we look at the trust gap by generation. So what you start to see is that the boomers have highest trust in their general practitioner at 74%, which drops steadily from Gen X. 70% have trust, Gen Y 65%, and Gen Z have only 57% of them have trust in their primary care provider. And this speaks volumes about our dissociation with standardized healthcare pathways. And it's quite sad to see a drop in trust when actually, given where technology has gone, we should see an increase in trust. But something is changing in younger attitudes to healthcare providers. Something is changing in the way we view healthcare and how it's delivered. And we definitely see a difference in age. I am of the generation that will not seek help until I am truly, truly at risk. I say this because the only time I went to A&E was with a suspected deep vein thrombosis. And prior to that, I was like, I will only go to A&E if I'm at risk of dying. And I had this pain in my leg. And I spoke to the best doctor in the world that I know, which is my dad. And he swore a lot at me, actually, professionally speaking. And I went to A&E, and it was quite funny because it was a really hot summer's day, and I messaged Deirdre, who was very concerned about me, and she said, you poor thing, I can't believe you're there all on your own. And I wrote back saying, I'm in my element. I've got my laptop out. It's air conditioned here. I don't have any babies on me. And she just said, your bar is very low. And it is. But that will tell you the extent that it will take to make me go and seek medical care. But the younger generation are quite different. Of the 680,000 women who've done our health assessment, 25% are between 18 and 25. This is a generation who have grown up with access at their fingertip. Instant access, instant gratification. I will order it, it will arrive. They are expecting different things from health. So it's quite surprising to see the different levels of trust. Okay, when no one is available to listen, the internet unfortunately becomes a lifeline. So what I want to show you here first is the number of people who are using ChatGPT for their symptoms. And actually the latest Lancet or Nature paper showed that actually ChatGPT is not good for getting you to a diagnosis. Yes, it can give you some answers. But what we know from this is that if you are using unstructured data that doesn't include women, data that doesn't stratify every clinical trial to include women as being different entities, having different reactions. And I want to give you an example of how different we are in terms of even our synthesis of drugs. So 8 out of 10 drugs that have been taken off the market have been taken off because of their adverse reactions in women. So when we see that clinical trials only include men, then we use these same drugs on women, women die. And so when we use data that has been formulated and out there on men, and women look up their symptoms, what we're going to see is that they get incorrect advice. So 6% of UK patients have used AI chatbots to get health information. I can see this growing. 50% have used Google as their primary source of reproductive health information. 480 million estimated health-related searches by British women across Google and TikTok in 1 year. TikTok. Mm-hmm. For health. I'm too old to have TikTok. I'm grateful for that. But 30% of fertility users sought online resources for support and research before coming to us. So I think what we can safely say is there is a need for structured, labeled, known patient data that is giving people truly robust outcomes. So what I wanted to take a quick second for, because this was one of the pillars that we deleted, it was too big. It was the report was too big. It's on. I think we have one printed report and it's on its way here. It took a taxi from North London. Bring it up. This is actually a really big report. I know every tube journey that I've spent has been going through this reproductive report, and bless the team for getting it. But it was such a big report showing all of the different aspects. And one of the things that we collated within this report was about motherhood and how our attitudes to motherhood have changed, and actually how planning begins earlier, but in a very different way. And what I want to show you is the difference between Gen Z and millennials and their attitude towards motherhood and planning. So we know that the average age for first-time motherhood is now 31. But also what we've seen is there is a 170% increase in the number of egg freezing cycles. And egg freezing is the first step in saying, I want to be a mother one day, but right now I'm not ready. So it is the first step in becoming a mother when you say, let's take these eggs out, put them on ice and wait. But what I want to look at here are the number of individuals who tell us that they want to have a baby in the future. Because actually wanting to have a baby has become a little bit unfashionable. We're career girls. We've got things to do. We like our time. We like our social lives. It's actually not really cool to be broody anymore and just want to settle down and have kids in your 20s. Not at all. We've had such an extreme societal change in our expectation on women and ourselves that actually now if somebody gets engaged at 30, we find ourselves saying, you're a bit young. You sure? He's all right, but you've plenty of time. And so if you're only getting married at 30, well, you want to have some time and you want to have your deposit and you want to settle down and you want to have a little bit of time while you still like each other. But actually, the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists did have, they took it down, a historical poster that said, what to do with the geriatric mother. And what age do you think a geriatric mother was defined as? 5? Oh, 27. You're old. Welcome to the geriatric club. 27 was considered geriatric. But if you think about the huge difference in our lifetime of our expectations on women, not just to get a job, but to have a career, to have passions, to have friends, to have social lives, all of those things have meant that that time until motherhood has significantly gone out. But if before you weren't expected to go to university or get a job, you were expected to get married and have children, well, then there's a long gap between the age of 18 and 27. So it's not too surprising that healthcare professionals at 27 might just say, what to do with this geriatric mother? But it does show you that in a small amount of time, we have completely redefined when we should have children. And we've completely overlooked that biology has not changed in its capacity to wait for us. We have incredible tools and incredible people who enable us to do that, like the embryologists in the room. But nonetheless, recognizing whether you want to have children or not is something not many people admit out loud. They might scare off the person they're in a new relationship with. They might get embarrassed because their friends are too busy partying. And I'm making mean generalizations, but the reality is if we don't have these conversations sooner, it means actually sad conversations happen later. And so when we ask women, do you want to have kids? What we see is that actually a huge number of women who come to us are considering kids, just not right now. And they want information about their bodies so that they can actually make decisions to inform what they do with their lives. And that's a truly powerful thing. Bearing in mind when I started, I was in my 30s, trying to not calculate so that you guess. It's fine. I've already claimed geriatric. But I remember thinking and being told in my department, which was quite flippant advice, just freeze your eggs. And me thinking, I don't really want to, mostly because I knew the embryologists who were going to be looking at me down in those stirrups. I thought, I don't think I want them to see me at that angle. But also because I thought, maybe I'm all right. Maybe I can afford to wait, because I certainly couldn't afford fertility treatment. I certainly couldn't afford to freeze my eggs at that stage. And thinking, well, even from the basic genetics perspective, I'm the youngest of 6. Maybe I'm very fertile. But not having actually data to support that. And so that's why it's actually a very powerful weapon that we can give women to say, actually, what are your capabilities? What is your rough timeline? And can you afford to wait? Or do you need extra help? So 17% of Gen Zs are actively trying to conceive versus 30% of millennials. No surprises there. But what we see is that of the Gen Zs, 48%, nearly 49% plan to have children in the future versus 41% of millennials. And then those who came to us seeking answers about their fertility were actually pretty close on, 50% of Gen Z versus 60% of millennials. Okay, last revelation. You're still with me? Thank you. Grateful. I have no idea how long I've been talking for. I can go forever. Okay, we already have the tools, and this is what we've built, and this is what I really want to highlight to you. We just need to get the care and investment that we deserve. And why each of you are here tonight is to be an advocate as well. And if you do nothing else, take away information, download our report, go and teach other people in your life. The most seemingly obvious of information that I've just displayed is actually not known by many people. So offer it, educate people, educate your friends. When we look at the gender health gap, it's old news. I'm bored of it. All I want to see is change. When we look at the clinicians, 80% of clinicians observe sex-based differences in disease prevention. Understandable. 30% feel equipped to treat them effectively. But despite only 30% feeling equipped to treat effectively, despite the need for more funding, less than 2% of public research funding is dedicated to reproductive health and childbirth. And the last 10 years worth of Lancet paper data showing what are the top killers of people worldwide. Neonatal death, maternal death is in the top 5. And yet we see this lack of funding of the top killers in the world. So we have not created a new need. We exist because the system has created a need for us. So I'm back to this beautiful graph, which no one ever understands when taught it in a biology lesson, if you're lucky enough to be taught it. I will say that at-home testing actually removes a huge barrier to entry. It actually unlocks a huge data gap. And when we see that 1 in 5 women have missed cervical screening because they couldn't take the time off work, that 8.74% is the average day off work for an IVF cycle. It's probably much longer. Using annual leave or sick pay with no statutory time off work. 61% fear raising fertility treatment at work in case of the stigma it will have, despite 1 in 6 suffering from infertility. And then 12 times opportunities per year to accurately, there are 12 moments only every year for you to accurately test your reproductive hormones. So again, I will just take a call to being able to do things from home really does unlock at the couch in your clinic. So the major reason we do this are to get people to a diagnosis. If you have done a fertility test and you haven't given us a 5-star review, you can do it right now. I don't mind if you take out your phone. Really and truly, these are the things that keep us going. It is actually quite sad looking at data time and time again. That means that women don't feel supported. It's quite satisfying to be able to actually create that data. But moreover, when we see pictures of fertility hatchlings being sent to us and people saying, fertility is the reason I am holding my 10-month-old, that is a reason to just keep going. So I will hope you are all part of the reproductive revolution just by being here. But I want to say thank you so much for joining us this evening, and thank you. The most important thing that I didn't say was the most inordinate thank you to Caro and to Zoya for their unbelievable work. They have been working with the hardest individual there is, and that I am like the moving time point. I am hard to pin down in terms of the review, but please download the report, and the QR code is here. And thank you to all of the team who've made this possible. That helps me.
We still have 15 minutes for any questions. Yes.
Great.
Thank you. That was absolutely fascinating. I'm really intrigued. It's Anna from Future Femme Health here, and really intrigued about how we might integrate what you're doing with the NHS, because it seems like you could be that lifeline that it needs to cut the waiting list, to get women answers faster. And as we know, the waiting lists are just astronomical at the moment. So yeah, just curious about your perspective on that.
I have tried time and time again, but the system is quite broken. And so I equate it to knocking on the door of a building, but there is no building behind it. There is a door, but there is no one person that is responsible. But I will say is that last month I spoke in Dubai at the World Health Summit, and the two people on the front row were the CEO of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and Sue Mann, who is the first person who's been appointed as the Women's Health Lead. And they were sat in the front row, and all I had to do was fly to Dubai to meet these two people who are... but they both were like, we need to talk. So the next available appointment for them was April. But yeah, I would do anything to be able for every single healthcare practitioner to use our health assessment and our calculation. To me, it's like people not using a calculator. I think this should be in the hands of every single primary and secondary care provider so that they are making an informed decision about the onward care for their patients. Yeah.
Just behind you. Hi, I'm Diffbury. I'm a GP who went through IVF myself. So I completely agree with what you're saying around the fact that we should have these tests. As I'm sure you're aware, the NICE guidelines are very against things like AMH, even when it comes to things like ferritin, optimal versus what is considered deficient, vitamin D. There are all these things. Educating GPs is a whole challenge in itself.
Help me.
And then, and then when it comes to then substratifying it by ethnicity, I didn't know whether there was any data on that. But the other thing that I wanted to do is that, so I work in preventative health at the moment, and looking at the lifespan of a woman, looking at the yearly testing, I didn't know whether that was something that Hertility was going to do, because some of the research that I've been looking into is that how quickly a woman would, like her AMH can rise during perimenopause, can be indicative of osteoporosis. You have like ethnicity and diabetes. There's all this information that's untapped, and I didn't know how much research there was around that.
So we have one of the most rich data sets when it comes to ethnicity. It was one of the first things that we wanted to embed within the health assessment. Wasn't just asking for the sake of asking what's your ethnicity or your genetic lineage, but actually building in to that weighted algorithm a risk. So South Asian women go into menopause on average 4 years earlier. If a Black woman goes through our health assessment and tells us they have pelvic pain, we triage them higher because it's much more likely they have fibroids. So that is really interwoven into our clinical prediction, because every woman is quite different and your risk factors are quite different depending on your ethnicity. We also see different levels of AMH, for example, depending on your ethnicity. So that is something we actually launched, Black Women's Health Initiative, looking at even attitudes towards seeking help and the different health-seeking behaviours of individuals, depending on whether you were Black or white. And actually, it was a stark difference in attitudes, irrespective of whether it was IVF. So the HFEA published report saying that Black women were less likely to appear for IVF. And we thought, I wonder, is the data the same when you remove the idea of going to a clinic? But the data is still the same. They're on average 5 years older before and trying to conceive for 5 years before they'll even seek at-home reproductive health testing. And that, to us, knowing that data means that then you approach a situation quite differently. Maybe you need to shout a little louder and be more present in certain places. But that is truly woven into what we're doing. There is, if you want to work with us on this, there is so much. And I say this all the time. We have created our own biobank. So from now on, we are consenting to keep samples so that we can do onward multi-omic research on those, so that we can really uncover much more information. But there are over 1 million ways that we can analyze our health assessment. So if there's something of key interest to healthcare professionals, I want them to come forward and say, let's work together on this.
Sounds amazing.
Great.
Hi, thank you. I'm Morgan from FormaMeds. You mentioned the workplace. We know there is a big, gap between fertility, trying to conceive, being pregnant, and the workplace. But also it's a great way to target these women who are trying to conceive instead of just telling them to freeze their eggs, because most benefit in the biggest corporation are to freeze their eggs. Yep. Are you targeting to corporates and just B2B in general? Is this something you're going to?
Yes, we work with corporates. Everyone here who has a job, please go to your employer and tell them that we provide the most comprehensive health benefits for women in the workplace. We work with a number of individuals. We launched with Apple. We are constantly looking to bring not just a benefit to the workforce, but also education. So one of the things that we always insist we do is we go in and they have to listen to usually me or Breed or one of our team give lunch and learn on reproductive health, hormone health, on managing menopause, on IVF, assisted reproduction, on LGBTQ pathways for assisted reproduction. That we have a whole series of different talks that we will do in the workplace so that we can really address number one, the gaps in knowledge, but also the fact that women are missing so much work, even when they're there, that absenteeism and presenteeism that workforces experience as a result of not addressing early. And for us, that was one of the biggest things, was saying, if a workplace is willing to spend £27,000 per employee for fertility treatment, there is something very wrong with that giant bandage, that they aren't coming sooner. The fact that, that they are that they are telling women, encouraging women that they should just freeze their eggs is altogether the wrong narrative. It should be about actively addressing that a certain number of your workforce may want to have kids, and that is not a dirty word, and that actually you're going to accommodate it, you're going to support it, and you're not going to enable them to go looking for work elsewhere. So I think actually what we are seeing is a true difference in attitudes from HR managers and those leaders, because they recognize the sheer return on investment that they get from investing in preventative health as opposed to downstream IVF pathways. Go to your employers, please.
Helen.
Hi.
Hi, nice to see you again. Dominique from Amboy Street Ventures. We followed you from day one, and the consensus in the investment space in women's health is like, and this is obviously the most in the positive light, you're like the Bezos of women's health, because I wish there were as many brands that were so authentic and transparent and fierce about being obsessed about the end user, the patient, the human, the heartbeat. So thank you for that. This is not to discount everything wildly brilliant that you are doing, but I do need to know, is there a time and a space where Hertility moves beyond the life stages of just the fertility? Now, as a menopausal human being who has a teenage daughter.
Oh, we work across the whole life. We work across, I'll tell you, we work menstruation through menopause.
Okay.
But one of the reasons why we don't advertise menopause is that it is a wild world out there where people fight.
It is.
As soon as you mention that you want to give it's bad enough with fertility, and people are like, well, femtech is taking advantage. It's not. Then now there's the meno wars and meno washing.
And the fatigue, the fatigue of not knowing where to go.
This is something that we put our stunning menopause product out there. We test your hormones because that is what 90% of women want, even though the clinical guidelines say don't test hormones. Guess what? It's actually very informative to do so. And that you can get a prescription the same day as you talk to someone. It will be delivered to your house, depending on the time of your consultation that day or the following day. Like the most seamless menopause journey we have already. We are moving into pregnancy pathways as well. We have received a very important milestone, which I can't talk about, which I will tell you over a coffee.
Okay.
Cocktail. Which will enable us to do pregnancy testing. Our goal is to be the end-to-end reproductive life stage companion for every single woman. We did call our app the gynecologist in your pocket until we realized it was quite creepy. Nobody really wants the gynecologist in their pocket.
Wonderful. I look forward to hearing it.
Yeah, good.
Okay. But any investors in the room, don't do what we did and we didn't invest.
Yeah,
we're kicking ourselves.
I was like, is the elephant in the womb?
Yeah, we're kicking ourselves.
Said no.
Oh, hi, Helen. Thank you so much for a brilliant talk. I had a question around Hertility's reference ranges. So often I've sort of resonate with being dismissed. I've been dismissed so many times. And I've taken my blood test results to my GP, but I think they're always concerned about external they just think I'm a scientist, so I'm being too extra. But I wanted to know about your reference ranges, and are your reference ranges based on your population that you test, or are they national? Because often it's the reference rates, say for iron, they're often for the general population, and for women it needs to be different. And
Does it need to be different? Shouldn't reference ranges be standardized? No, they're not. Yeah. We use clinically accredited laboratories, and every single analyte that we test has a defined set of reference ranges. But when you go to the NHS, the reference ranges are extremely wide, because if they were refined to pick things up, that would amount to a lot of people needing onward referral. And so it's one of the biggest bugbears that I have, is that you would assume that one reading in picomoles per milliliter in any of the international units should be on the same standardized set of reference ranges. But unfortunately, NHS reference ranges are a lot wider, so that they don't have to then refer on for extra special. It's not that anyone's trying to avoid help, but I think it would end up with an even bigger backlog. But one of the reference ranges that we have done a huge analysis on is on testosterone, because testosterone is still considered a male hormone, despite the fact that we have plenty of testosterone in our bodies. And the global reference range for testosterone is still set off fewer people than we will test in a single day. So we've analysed now all the testosterone so that we can actually acutely associate what reference you should be in depending on your age and your condition. So when typically reference ranges are actually set by the analyzer or the company. So they will say, this is the assay that we're doing. We're going to run it on 30 individuals, and we're going to see where does this bell curve fall. And what they don't do is stratify appropriately for age. They don't stratify appropriately for ethnicity, and they don't stratify appropriately for conditions. Meaning that if you were to take testosterone in the general population, given that 1 in 10 women have PCOS, and that leads to raised androgens and raised testosterone, you're falsely actually elevating that reference. So that is something that we are working to fight clinical guidelines, but we're also kind of working to redefine reference ranges.
I'm going to allow one more question, and then I'm going to invite you back to the atrium where you have some drinks, some snacks.
There's another one at the back.
Okay, 2 questions.
Okay.
And you will be able to ask all of your questions. You can track people wearing these t-shirts, and hopefully they will have an answer.
May I? Thank you so much for this amazing talk. My name is Oksana. I'm a student at UCL, not a researcher in femtech, but really interested in that. And my question is about the product, because you said that you are combining the data. And do you use the data from general wearables, or are they useful at all? Or are you thinking of using this data? Because this can be an enhancement to your data set.
Yeah, sure. We are, in the app, we're going to have the ability for you to pull in your wearable data, irrespective of what wearable, because otherwise, if you're just a single, sometimes the integrations can be agnostic of a single one. But if you're not able to pull in the differences, then you're going to miss out. What's hard is, or what will be a challenge, is the fact that those wearables metrics are also set on certain types of criteria. So that's an additional challenge that I'm grateful I have a stunning data team in the background that I'm able to call out individual geniuses within my company that will help. But that will be a challenge, is actually standardizing what the wearable companies set as their proxy for unhealthy or healthy. But we'll have to do it ourselves. Thank you.
Hello. Yes. My name's Khadija. I'm a GP trainee, but also the founder of the Akaya Foundation, which is a non-profit serving young Black women in the UK and in Ghana. And I think some of the data that you shared really resonates, because I think it cuts across globally. Mm-hmm. Even young girls, your data relating to how younger women don't even have that much knowledge about their own menstrual cycles. Mm-hmm. And that ripple effect as they grow up and then want to, become pregnant and stuff, it's just going to continue. And so my question is, what role is Hertility playing in terms of education for the younger women in their classrooms, whether it be, with the support of youth organizations, if you are already playing a role, and if not, I'd love to sort of support that kind of work as well.
So we actually have gone to, we did the International Girls School Coalition so that we could teach the teachers about how to talk about reproductive health. So we did seminars and gave educational sessions on how to talk about hormones, how to talk about menstrual cycles, because even though we've gone to individual schools to talk about it, unless you equip the actual teachers to teach it, then actually that information only gets passed on to one cohort of individuals. But I would love to help. I would love to work with you and work together on that, because I think there's so much more we can do when we combine forces. Thank you, everyone. Go get a drink.
Oh my God, are you exhausted?